Hi guys. Okay, so I wanted to talk again about runes of potential. And I know I've talked about these runes before, but I want to go a little bit deeper. Um, I find them very interesting. I find them to be really powerful tools for self-empowerment in, when you need to get bumped up to that next level. When you're in uh, you've hit that plateau, or you're having some crisis, evolutionary crisis that's really wanting to push you. So I really wanted to talk about these runes, and it's also when I talk about these runes, they tend to affect me. So I'm looking for the benefit of Hagalaz here. So as you know, I go back and forth between my pronunciation of Hagalaz and Hagalaz. That's because in the Anglo-Saxons, would pronounce something as a Y. For instance, the word that we have today, egg, E-G-G, the Anglo-Saxons pronounced it as A. They didn't pronounce it as a G. We pronounce it as a G because there were Vikings, there were Norse who came in and for hundreds of years had their own kingdoms in Britain, and they called that same thing an egg. So that's why we call it egg. That's actually a Norse. It's not English, it's Norse. So I go back and forth between Hagalaz and Hagalaz because in modern language we say hail, we don't say hagel. And so, anyway. But I still haven't decided which pronunciation I'm gonna choose over the other. So anyway. So Hagalaz, Isa, Yuhwaj, Nauthiz, to name a few, are runes that are oftentimes seen as negative, danger. Maybe that's what I should call them. They're seen as danger runes. And I think this is a misunderstanding. I think part of it is because people make superficial, arbitrary associations. A hailstorm, obviously, when there's a hailstorm going on, you want to get inside because you don't want to get pelted on the head with, big giant hailstones. So I think people make these kinds of superficial, arbitrary connections. I think also it is because we don't like to grow. And, we don't grow unless we have to. And so when growth comes to us, a lot of people find reasons to resist that. Your unconscious resistance kicks in and, all of that. And all of these runes, the ones that I've mentioned, the only one that, I personally, and this may just be, showing you the state of my evolution, the only one that I, get a little bit concerned is when Yuhwaj comes up, because Yuhwaj, is usually challenging, and it usually means there's some kind of conflict going on, or you experience conflict. Which, by the way, fighting in relationships, it's no fun. I don't like it. One of the things I really loved about my fiance is that I can't really think of any one time that we actually fought. I just can't think of one time. A couple of disagreements, but no yelling and screaming, none of that ever happened. But when that does happen, when you've got fights and there's conflict and there's yelling and screaming, it's because the relationship is seeking to evolve to a higher level. And so what you're really fighting about is your resistance to that. You're resisting going to the next level, and it feels like it's killing you, and so you fight about it. Now, if such a state of mind existed, if I were to be able to get to the place where I never had any resistance to anything, and then when Yuhwaj came, then it would be like, oh, let's just be empowered. Well, I haven't got that far yet. I don't know if you have. My hat and my hair is off to you. And Hagalaz is the other side of that, as you know. And the way that I interpret these two runes of transformation is that Yuhuaj is involuntary. You know, it's coming at you whether you like it or not. And Hagalaz, on the other hand, is voluntary. So I categorize it as voluntary transformation. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be pleasant, but you have more control than you would, or at least you have the experience that you have more control over it than you do with Yuhuaj. So again, it's not a negative rune, and you know, just to show you, I'm sure you're aware of it, but you know, a lot of, you know, your typical rune books and cards and all of that, they have this list of things that they throw meanings to when it comes to runes. So I'm just going to read you what's on the back of this card here, you know, which I used to use. I don't really use these anymore unless I'm doing rune readings, which means maybe I should get some actual runes instead of cards, because I don't do the phone stuff anymore. But in any case, so let me just read to you what's on the back here. It says, theme hailstorm. Okay, so we get that from the name Hagalaz, which means hail. The key words are disruption, distress, storm, setback, hidden blessing, unexpected. That is not my experience of this rune. Hidden blessing, I can see that. But again, you know, this is just somebody making superficial, arbitrary associations to the word hail. That's all they're doing here. They're not really thinking about what they're doing. It goes on to more. It says magical working, recover from a crisis. I would agree with that. Finding the hidden blessing, transformation, accepting nature's power. What does that mean? Accepting nature's power. You know, I mean, what do I do with that? See what I mean? Key phrases: unexpected destructive forces. Forces beyond your control. Crisis with a hidden benefit. A blessing in disguise. Unexpected change. Ruined plans. Sudden crisis. Seek the cloud's silver lining. Don't count your chicks before they hatch. I may have read this list to you before, but I mean, it's just, you know, really, it's just somebody sitting there just pulling whatever they can out of their ass to, you know, you've got hidden blessing, you've got forces beyond your control, unexpected destructive forces, but you know, recover from a crisis. This sounds a lot more like Yuhuaj to me than Hagalaz. If this were, you know, if this and Yuhuaj are that similar, what's the point of having two runes? You see what I mean? So, you know, I want to address that I don't see it that way, obviously. I've made myself clear on that. So I do see this as a rune of healing. I don't see it as a rune of destruction. Yuhuaj is a healing rune, but it is also a rune of destruction. I mean, that's the force of healing that comes through Yuhuaj is going to be through destruction. You know, it's involuntary transformation, you know, through destruction. It's death. It's a death rune. This is not a death rune. This is a birth rune. And we've got the connection to water here, obviously. So we've got the hailstone here connected to water. Perhaps we might say it's an intense healing. It might have some intensity, some more intensity to it than, you know, a slow, gradual healing. And it's a healing that comes about as a result of cleansing. So I would agree that it's a cleansing rune. So there's no, is cleansing in there? I don't see cleansing anywhere in there. Nope. Don't count your chicks before they hatch. Where did you get that? Where do you get that? Anyway, I make fun of it because, you know, I mean, it's just, what it reveals to me is they really don't know what they're doing. And they know they don't know what they're doing. And it also reveals to me that, you know, they really don't take it very seriously. Because if you take something seriously, you actually want to find out what it means. You don't want to try and be cute and well, let's just throw as many out there as possible and see if we can, you know, get a meaning out of it. I guess that's what bothers me, that it's flippant. So this is a rune of healing, and another word I would use is self-correction. So every time you're typing on your iPhone or on your iPad or on your desktop, and your computer wants to correct your grammar for you or your spelling, um, that's a Hagalaz. It's trying to self-correct for you. It's a little bit different because it's doing it without your permission. And that's another thing. I'm so into words, and I'm so into writing, and when people type in questions like on the Q&A or on the just when people text you or when people email you or something, sometimes the words, you can tell the words that are on the page are not what the person wanted to write, and they didn't spend the time to actually go and proofread what they had written. It's interesting. This thing's supposed to help you self-correct, and you end up having to proofread what you're writing so that it doesn't make a mistake for you because it's a computer and it doesn't understand, how language works. But this is a rune of self-correction, and so one of the reasons I'm talking about this rune today is, yesterday I did a Q&A, and I really allowed myself. I was about to say I lost it. The truth is I didn't lose it. I didn't lose control. I was in control of what I was doing. But I allowed myself to indulge in being angry and offended at something that somebody had said. I haven't decided if I regret it or not. I've watched some of it, and I'm like, ooh, I went a little overboard there, a little too much. And so it embarrassed me. But that's my ego. My ego gets embarrassed. I could have responded in a different way, and I chose to respond the way that I did. And again, I think part of it was because this was a gentleman who was suggesting that the news reports that the Syrians had been attacked with chemical weapons was fake news. And I could have responded to that without choosing to get angry at it. But I think what I wanted to punch up is how flippant that attitude was. I mean, somebody could very easily have said, hey, he doesn't know any better. He's just a blah, 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 And I don't believe that he didn't know what he was doing. I believe he was indulging in wanting to be cute, in the idea of, because I think people like the idea. They think it's cute. They think they're, being clever. If, the more deep you can get into, the hidden agenda and the deep state and the all of those conspiracy. I think people, they don't do it because they actually believe it. They do it because they think it makes them look cute, makes them look clever, and then it becomes a competition to see who can get more into the crazy stuff than others, and that's just flippant. The lack of awareness to know that what you're saying here could really be incredibly damaging on multiple levels. Had the person said, what do you think about others who say that? That would have been a different question. But he threw out, it's a lie, and he was being cute. He thought he was being cute. And so I chose to allow myself to stay within the theme of the video, which was Jupiter and Saturn retrograde. But I'm doing a little self-correction here. Now that I look at that, I go, yeah, it was an experiment. I let myself do it. And looking back on it, all it did was it brought attention to me, and as opposed to what it was that I was saying. And while I don't think that gentleman will ever make those kind of flippant comments about chemical weapons again without at least thinking about it, I think it'll at least enter his brain that he might want to think about it. He may choose to, try and be cute and, rebel against me to prove to himself. He may choose to go that route, and that's none of my business. But in any case, this is what Hagalaz is. Hagalaz is self-correction, self-analysis. But let's talk about healing, because it's a rune of healing as well. So I think what the message of Hagalaz is that all healing is self-induced. That it doesn't really matter what the method is that it comes through. It is always self-induced. Just as my take is that all challenges and difficulties and misery, especially misery, is self-induced for sure. And you may not see it in the moment. You may have trained yourself over, because when you continue to make choices to justify staying out of alignment, you continue to make choices like that, it builds up a resistance. Just like taking any kind of medication, drugs or medication, you build a resistance. Every time you take that medication, your body builds up resistance. You have to take more next time to get the same effect. So the same is true with our lives. When it comes to getting ourselves into problems, we have to make the choice to keep creating the scenario that we're in until we get to the point where we feel like we're out of control. So let me give you an example for myself. So I sort of experimented yesterday. I allowed the planetary feeling, at least my experience was that I was having this feeling, I still have it, by the way. I'm still feeling it from the retrograde planets. I chose to allow myself to go there and to make the choice to really, just let that part out of me. Now, if I wasn't doing any self-correction, I could say to myself, I could justify to myself, I could find reasons to justify to myself why that's good and a true teacher this and all that. And then just because I was justifying my ego, then I could definitely get into a pattern of getting more aggressive and more allowing myself to get more angry and more direct and more critical of people. And I would have a ready-made justification for it. And all it would really do is it would just get me locked deeper and deeper into my ego, which, as we know, I have an issue with. I'm not trying to hide that. I've got an issue with that. People criticize me, and I've had the habit of responding to negative criticism far more easily than positive criticism. So I want to be aware of that. But definitely, I could see if I chose to decide to hold on to that and not acknowledge, at least to myself, that that's it was an experiment and I'm not going to go there anymore. There's no need to get that angry about anything. It doesn't accomplish anything. It doesn't, the only thing it does, like I said, it brings attention to me, and then it puts the person on the defensive. And there's sometimes it's worthwhile to do that. And lots of times I do that. Sometimes I do it for the effect that it's going to have on the individual that I'm responding to. And this, of course, this happens, in a microsecond in my brain. But if I decide that there's really nothing that can be done for that person, then I may choose to respond in order to allow others to feel, to have me express their rage and their anger. Because especially if somebody were to say something racial. And I've got people in, as apprentices that are of all kinds of different ethnic backgrounds. So sometimes I want to stand up and point a finger at what I think is not okay. I don't think it's, freedom of speech does not give people the right to attack others in ways that can, that are really damaging. And so sometimes I want to stand up for them. That's part of the protector in me. Yeah, and the more that I thought about little kids, the more angry I got about that. But anyways, I am doing some self-correcting, and I don't think that I'm going to make that a habit. I think that I'm going to acknowledge that within myself and, be more, what's the word I want to use? Be more picky about when I let that fire out and when I don't. Because I did have control. I could have chosen, it wasn't like I was out of control and raging and all that. I was choosing to do that. So from now on, I think I'm going to allow myself to make some different choices. So I'm just doing the self-correction here of Hagalaz. Again, self-healing. So self-healing, this is interesting because I think the message of Hagalaz is that healing is always self-induced. So that means if you go to a healer and he lays hands on you, or she and does some kind of whatever, and magically you're healed. I think that Hagalaz is saying that it's still you that's doing the self-healing. If I were to take that to even a further degree, I would say even medication, or sometimes food, or just sometimes the body will heal itself. And so regardless of what method it comes through, from a shamanic perspective, it indicates that we have chosen to heal ourselves. And I've talked about how, healing, if somebody has the power to heal, assuming that that's a real thing, even if somebody has the power to do that, all that's happened is that person is paying back a karmic debt to the other person, and then that frees them up to heal themselves. I don't think the healer really does it. I could be wrong, and I'm open to be wrong about that, but that's my take on it. And if all healing is self-healing, then that means that we are responsible. We are responsible for our health. We are responsible for our state of being. And so it again takes away any power that somebody or something can do anything to us, either positive or negative. I was sharing with somebody about, I was in my group, my people that I go to. And I'm moving over here because I'm looking at the coffee cup of me and my fiance, my Shakti. And I was, the concept came up about her, about, they had seen a huge change in me, and, that it was really magical. And I had said, yeah, she really healed me and the facilitator stopped and said, no, you healed yourself. I didn't try to correct him. At that moment, that's not how it felt to me. It really felt like she had healed me. But the truth is that, she just was able to get in there and stimulate the switches so that I could do it myself. There aren't, she's not unique in that there have been other people who have wanted the same things for me and, tried to give same kinds of things that she gave. She just happened to have the right frequency for me that everything lined up and I allowed it in. But I was the one that did the self-healing, so, I credit her as the feminine Shakti that, came into my life and really empowered me on so many levels, and that I was able to, be where I'm at today. I wouldn't have the success that I have now had I not allowed myself to be healed as a result of her influence on me. So you can see I'm being very clear and deliberate with the language that I'm using. Because again, I think responsibility is really important. This is why I emphasize to such a degree that, that there aren't any victims. And the first, I don't know if the first one, but one of the first steps to overcoming all of that is to take full responsibility for your life. So that means taking full responsibility for all of the challenges and the problems, even though on the surface it looks like it's happening to us. We have to take full responsibility and say, we got ourselves here. We, for whatever reason, karmically or, through unconscious, deliberate choices, we put ourselves exactly where we are. And I would say the same is true for all kinds of illnesses. Even, if somebody is born, a congenital defect that, medical science can't cure and would be seemingly very unlikely to cure through any other kinds of, self-healing or, energy work or magic or anything like that, then, in my experience, the only real way to work through that is to take the responsibility that this was a choice that the individual made before they were born in order to balance a misunderstanding or some thought process that was preventing them from getting what they want. So I firmly believe that sometimes, lifetimes can make jumps. In other words, let's say somebody wants to learn how to be a better um, healer, wants to learn how to be, have better relationships, because what they really deeply want inside is to have relationships on a soul level. They want to experience that desire. They want to experience human relationships, love relationships, um, in order to fulfill their long-term soul desire. I believe that a soul could say, okay, so for this lifetime, I'm going to choose to have this issue and this problem, and it's going to be lifelong, and I won't be able to overcome it, because then it'll really just pound into me the understanding of what that feels like, so that the life after that one, then I can come back and I can be the whatever it was that will provide them that relationship they're looking for. I do believe that a lot of lives are like that. And so even then, if somebody is, born with some congenital major, illness or problem, if you take the attitude that they are fully responsible for that, that they chose to design themselves that way, then, it, it makes it a lot easier for them to enjoy their life and to find the joy. Because you can't be feeling sorry for yourself and having a good time at the same time. You can't. You can't be in that state of limitation and in that state of openness. You're one or the other. You're either in or you're out. Sometimes there is a spectrum, but when it comes to that, you're either in or you're out. So again, I think that would be Hagalaz. That would be self-correction, self-healing. Having said that, I do believe that it's a very healthy attitude to adopt, that anything is possible. I've shown you with the film of the paratrooper who, by all accounts, was never going to walk again without crutches. And he not only did that, but he, from what I can tell, completely healed himself and is, fully, completely 100% functional again. And that just that blows me away. So I'm open to the idea of anybody, being able to heal themselves. And I've seen it. I've seen, obviously somebody she was adamant about healing herself. Absolutely. She never, even up until it was undeniable, she refused to accept that, she couldn't heal herself. And we could make the argument that maybe that was part of the problem. But I guess what I'm saying is I definitely can see that, what was I going to say? I forgot what I was going to say. Point is that I want to stay open to the idea that anything is possible and that anybody can heal themselves from anything. And I think that's an important idea to have. When it comes to, it's kind of sad, but, when it comes to, like when we're dealing with people with emotional problems, addictions, things like that, it's sometimes, you kind of have to write them off and go, that person's not going to change. Because the truth of the matter is that people rarely change. They can, but they rarely do. Especially if they get really, really fixed into whatever their issue is. I don't like that. I don't like writing people off. But sometimes you got to just go, it's very unlikely that person's going to change. I'm just going to have to. When it comes to relationships, by the way, that's an important thing to know, because sometimes the one thing that will push people to change is when those that are co-signing them refuse to do that. So in relationships, I think it's important to be able to acknowledge that if you're in a situation that's unacceptable, and that no amount of compromise on your part is going to fix the problem. That no, this is somebody who is, that you just simply can't have what you want. Because that's what it comes down to. There's no such thing as a right or a wrong relationship. It's a question of whether or not you're able to get what you want in it. And sometimes you have to acknowledge, I'm just not going to get what I want from this person, and that's never going to change. And sometimes making that decision and then doing what you have to do, if that means leaving the relationship, that sometimes is the one thing that will knock somebody awake to go, wow, I got to change, because that person's more important than whatever it is that's getting in the way of the connection. So in any case, I think I've kind of said what I need to say about Hagalaz, the self-healing aspect of it, self-awareness. Hagalaz is a rune of self-awareness. And I think self-awareness, I always make these kinds of blanket statements, but without self-awareness, we can't have anything. We can't accomplish anything without self-awareness. And Hagalaz is definitely a rune of self-awareness. So, if you are somebody that is stuck and you know that you need to change, but you don't know how, one of the most typical ones is finances. You're stuck, and for whatever reason, you don't have enough money, and blah, blah, blah. You're doing everything you can. I hear this a lot. I've certainly said it a lot. I don't know what else to do. I've done everything. I've worked so hard on myself in this area. Of course, those of us that are outside of it can see, the blind spot that you're missing. But that doesn't do you any good. You got to see it. And so Hagalaz is a rune where you can take action. You can decide to go, okay, I don't know what it is that I need. I know I need something. I just don't know what. And so you can work with Hagalaz in order to become more self-aware of how you can change, And so, anyway, I'll leave it at that. Hagalaz. Yeah, I needed some Hagalaz today. So I like to work with runes that I need. I'm not going to talk about Yuhwaj today. I was thinking about talking about Esau, but I don't need Esau today. I need Hagalaz. So that's what I decided to talk about. Anyway, that's it for this video, my friends. I look forward to talking to you guys soon. Alrighty. Take care.